Some loves are born by chance, and some are born from ruin. Scarlett Monroe cleaned the highest floors of Manhattan without imagining that a single glance would change everything. Chase Valamont had it all: power, money, a last name that opened doors. But when his eyes met hers, nothing else mattered. What started as forbidden desire turned into overwhelming passion. But some loves come at a price. And what if the man you love carries in his last name the blood of your greatest pain? If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories like this. Manhattan never sleeps, never forgives. At 3 in the morning, the city still pulses like a wounded heart, full of lights that lie about who really lives there. Scarlett Monroe knew that lie well. She scrubbed it every day with a damp cloth and disinfectant, cleaning up the traces of the powerful, who would never look down at the floor they walked on, much less at who cleaned it. The Valamont Tower was one of those lies, 100 floors of glass and steel erected like a middle finger to the sky. From the outside, it was majestic. From the inside, it was cold, impersonal, a monument to greed disguised as progress. Scarlett had worked there for 8 months, always on the overnight shift, when the executives had already left and the silence allowed her to exist without being seen. She preferred it that way. Being invisible was safer. That night, the elevator took her up to the 100th floor, a place she rarely had to clean. It was the Valamont family's executive office. Italian marble floors, walls lined with dark wood, expensive paintings she didn't understand but that cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Scarlett pushed the cleaning cart down the wide corridor, feeling the weight of the silence. There was something unsettling about that floor. Maybe it was the smell, leather, varnished wood, old power, or maybe it was the fact that there, decisions that ruined lives were made between sips of $1,000 whiskey. She stopped in front of the double frosted glass doors that led to the main office. She hesitated. Usually that space was locked, but today the door was slightly open. Just a little, enough to let soft light escape from inside. Scarlett pushed the door slowly, her heart racing for no apparent reason. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was fear. And then she saw him. He was standing in front of the enormous window overlooking the city, hands in the pockets of his black dress pants, shoulders tense as if carrying an invisible weight. The city lights reflected off the glass, casting shadows on his face. Dark hair, slightly tousled, sharp jawline, upright posture. He didn't need to turn around for her to know who he was. Chase Valamont, the heir, the prince of the tower. Scarlett froze. She shouldn't be there. Shouldn't have entered. But before she could back away, he turned his head, just enough for his eyes to meet hers in the glass's reflection. Grey, cold, piercing, and then he turned completely. The air vanished from the room. "I'm sorry, Mr. Valamont. I didn't know anyone was here," Scarlett said quickly, gripping the cleaning cloth tightly, as if it were a shield. "I'll leave right now." "Don't." His voice was deep, controlled. "Stay." Scarlett blinked, confused. He took a step toward her, then another. Each movement was calculated, slow, as if he were measuring the distance between them. She should leave, should run. But her feet wouldn't obey. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, stopping a few feet away from her. 8 months. And I've never seen you before. I work at night when no one's around." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made Scarlett feel naked, exposed, as if he could see right through her. "What's your name?" "Scarlett. Scarlett Monroe." He repeated the name silently, as if memorizing it. Then he took another step. Now he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody, expensive, impossible to ignore. "Are you afraid of me, Scarlett?" The question caught her off guard. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "Should I be?" His lips curved into something that almost looked like a smile. "Almost. Most people are. I'm not most people." Silence. Heavy. Charged with something Scarlett couldn't name. He didn't take his eyes off her, and the longer he looked, the harder it became to breathe. There was something dangerous in that gaze, something that promised destruction, and, at the same time, salvation. Chase took another step, now so close that Scarlett could see the small flaws in his perfection. The thin line of a scar near his eyebrow, the shadow of exhaustion under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He was human, broken. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous. He reached out slowly, as if expecting her to pull back, but Scarlett didn't move. Couldn't. And then he touched, just his fingertips, a loose strand of her hair, tucking it behind her ear, with a gentleness that contradicted everything she thought she knew about men like him. The touch lasted only a second, but it was enough to ignite something inside her. "You're different," he murmured, his voice low, husky. "I don't know why, but you are." Scarlett swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding in her chest. "Mr. Valmont, Chase, I need to finish my work." He didn't step back. Not immediately. He stayed there, eyes fixed on hers, as if trying to solve a puzzle. And then, finally, he retreated. "Of course." His voice returned to its controlled, distant tone. But there was something new there, something that hadn't been there before. "Good night, Scarlett Monroe." She nodded, unable to speak, and left the room with trembling legs. When the door closed behind her, Scarlett leaned against the corridor wall, trying to catch her breath. What the hell had just happened? She brought her hand to the place where he'd touched, still feeling the ghost of that contact. Something had changed. She knew it, felt it in the air, on her skin, in her tight chest. And as the elevator took her back down, away from that 100th floor and everything it represented, Scarlett couldn't stop thinking about one thing. His eyes. Gray. Cold on the outside, but inside she'd seen fire. Scarlett didn't sleep that night or the next. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those gray eyes. Cold, piercing, filled with something she couldn't decipher. His touch still burned on her skin even days later. It was ridiculous, pathetic. He was Chase Valmont, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and she was just a janitor who cleaned up the remnants of his life. And yet, she couldn't forget him. What Scarlett didn't expect was that he hadn't forgotten her either. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. The following Monday, when she was cleaning the lobby on the 85th floor, Chase walked past her, accompanied by two executives in suits. He didn't look directly at her. That would be too strange, too inappropriate. But as he passed, his eyes slid in her direction for a second. Just 1 second. But it was enough to make Scarlett's heart leap. On Tuesday, she was emptying trash cans in the 92nd floor corridor when the elevator opened. Chase stepped out alone, tie loosened, the top buttons of his shirt undone. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway seemed to shrink, compress, until only that space between them existed. "Working late again?" he asked, hands in his pockets, his voice too casual to be genuine. "I always work late," Scarlett replied, gripping the garbage bag tightly. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Be careful not to wear yourself out." Before she could respond, he continued down the corridor and disappeared into his office. But Scarlett stood there, frozen, heart racing, trying to understand what those words really meant. Be careful, as if he cared, as if she were more than invisible. On Wednesday, it happened again. She was cleaning the windows on the 8th floor when she saw him crossing the main lobby below, and he looked up, straight at her. Across 8 floors of distance, their eyes met. Scarlett felt as if the world had stopped spinning. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just looked, and then kept walking. But that look said everything. On Thursday night, Scarlett was pushing the cleaning cart down the 97th floor corridor when she heard footsteps behind her. Firm, determined footsteps. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Her entire body recognized his presence before he even spoke. "Scarlett." She stopped, closed her eyes for a second, trying to control her breathing, and then turned slowly. Chase stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his dress pants, tie already removed, hair slightly disheveled as if he'd run his fingers through it several times. There was something different about him today, something less controlled, more human. "Mr. Vallemont," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Chase." He took a step toward her. "I already asked you to call me Chase. That wouldn't be appropriate." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Well, technically you're my boss's boss, and my boss's boss's boss." He almost smiled. Almost. "And does that matter?" "It should." Silence. Chase studied her for a long moment, jaw tense, eyes searching for something in her face, and then he took another step, and another, until he was too close, dangerously close. "Can I ask you a question?" he murmured, his voice low, husky. Scarlett nodded, unable to speak. "Do you feel this too?" Her heart stopped. "Feel what?" Chase raised his hand slowly, hesitantly, and lightly touched her arm, just his fingertips over the thin fabric of her uniform, but it was like an electric shock running through every cell in Scarlett's body. "This," he whispered. "This connection. This thing between us that doesn't make any sense, but that I can't ignore." Scarlett took a deep breath, trembling. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar." Her eyes met his, and there, in those gray eyes, she saw everything: desire, confusion, something bordering on desperation. He wasn't playing with her, wasn't having fun. He was being sincere, vulnerable, and that scared her more than anything. "Why me?" Scarlett asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Why, of all people, why me?" Chase tilted his head, his fingers still lightly touching her arm. "I don't know, believe me, I've tried to understand, tried to ignore you, but every time I close my eyes, you're there. Every time I enter this tower, I look for you. And I don't do this. I'm not this kind of person." "What kind of person?" "The kind who loses control." Scarlett swallowed hard. There was something dangerous happening here, something that went beyond physical attraction, something deeper, more frightening. "We can't," she began. "I know." He stepped back, running his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I know we can't, I know this is crazy, but Scarlett—" He looked at her again, and there was pain in that look. "I can't stay away from you." The silence that followed was loaded with everything that couldn't be said, with everything that was impossible. Scarlett knew she should back away, should put distance between them before it was too late. But when Chase took a step toward her again, she didn't move. He stopped right in front of her, so close that Scarlett could feel the heat from his body, so close she could see the small golden flecks in his eyes, so close that if she leaned in just 1 centimeter, their lips would touch. "Tell me I'm alone in this," Chase murmured, his voice hoarse, desperate. "Tell me you don't feel anything and I'll leave. I swear I'll never bother you again." Scarlett closed her eyes, tried to find the right words, the words that would end this before it began. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was the truth. "I can't say that." Chase let out the breath he'd been holding, and then he did something that changed everything. He slowly raised his hand and touched her face, his warm palm against Scarlett's cheek, his thumb gently caressing her skin. It was the most delicate touch she'd ever felt, and at the same time the most intense. "So what do we do?" he whispered, eyes fixed on hers. "I don't know." "Me neither." He brought his face closer, his forehead resting lightly against hers. Their breaths mingled, hot, irregular. "But I need you. Somehow, I need you." Scarlett closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words, feeling the danger of them, but also feeling the truth, because God help her, she needed him too. They stayed like that for a moment that felt like an eternity, foreheads touching, breaths intertwined, hearts beating in the same frantic rhythm. And then Chase pulled back, letting the cold take the place where his warmth had been. "Good night, Scarlett," he said, his voice filled with something that sounded dangerously like pain. He turned and walked down the corridor, disappearing around the corner, and Scarlett stood there alone, trembling, her skin still burning where he'd touched. She brought her hand to her face, feeling the ghost of his touch, and she knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Something had begun, something forbidden, something inevitable, and there was no turning back. There was a difference between wanting something and needing it. Scarlett had always known that. She'd learned early that life didn't give you what you wanted, only what you needed to survive. and for a long time surviving had been enough, until Chase Vallemont walked into her life and destroyed all her certainties. Friday night. The 99th floor was silent, the city lights flickering through the enormous glass windows. Scarlett was on her knees, scrubbing a stubborn stain on the carpet, when she heard the elevator open. She didn't even need to look. She already knew who it was. Her body recognized his presence before her eyes could confirm it. "You work too hard," Chase said, his voice echoing through the empty corridor. Scarlett didn't look up. "Someone has to do the dirty work. That's not what I meant." She finally looked up. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. There was something different about him today, something more relaxed. Or maybe it was exhaustion, or defeat. She wasn't sure. "Why are you here, Chase?" Scarlett asked, dropping the cloth and standing up. "Why do you keep showing up?" He took a step toward her. "You know why." "No, I don't. I don't understand any of this." She crossed her arms, trying to protect herself from his gaze. "You could have any woman in this city, women from your world, women who speak your language, who understand your rules. Why the hell are you wasting time with me?" Chase stopped right in front of her, his grey eyes searching hers with an intensity that made Scarlett want to run and stay at the same time. "Because all those women you mentioned?" He shook his head slowly. "They see me as a last name, as a bank account, as a ladder to climb." He raised his hand and this time didn't hesitate. He touched her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything Scarlett thought she knew about powerful men. "But you see me as a man, and I didn't know how much I needed that until I met you." Scarlett felt the words pierce something inside her, something she kept locked away, protected, far from anyone who could hurt her. "I can't be what you need," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You already are." And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't hesitant, it was desperate, hungry, as if he'd been dying of thirst and she was the first drop of water in an endless desert. His hands cupped her face, fingers threading through her hair, and Scarlett melted against him, all her defenses crumbling at once. She should push him away, should say this was wrong, but instead her hands found his chest, feeling the firm muscles beneath his shirt, his heart beating as fast as hers. The kiss deepened, tongues meeting, breaths mingling, and Scarlett felt like she was drowning and being saved at the same time. When they finally separated, both were breathless, foreheads pressed together, hands still clinging to each other as if letting go meant disappearing. "God," Chase murmured, his voice hoarse, broken. "What are you doing to me?" Scarlett couldn't answer, couldn't think. All she knew was that she wanted more, needed more. Chase pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes with a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "Come with me." "Where?" "Anywhere, away from here, away from this tower, these cameras, these rules." He held her face with both hands. "Just you and me, please." Scarlett knew she should say no, knew this would end badly. But when she looked into his eyes and saw all that need reflected there, she couldn't find the right words. "Okay," she whispered. 20 minutes later, they were at her apartment. A small, simple place in Brooklyn and miles away from his world. An old couch, a tiny kitchen, peeling walls she tried to disguise with cheap frames. Nothing compared to the luxury Chase knew. But when he entered, he didn't look at the walls, didn't see the poverty. He only saw her. "This is where you live?" he asked, closing the door slowly behind them. "It's what I can afford." Scarlett crossed her arms, suddenly self-conscious. "I know it's not. It's perfect." Chase crossed the small living room and stopped in front of her. "Because you're here." Scarlett felt her heart race. There was something different in the air now, something charged, inevitable. They were alone. No cameras, no rules. Nothing between them but the desire that had been burning for days. Chase slowly raised his hand, his fingers trembling slightly, not from nervousness but from restraint, and touched her cheek. "I've never wanted anyone like this," he confessed, his voice low, raw. "Never. And it scares me, Scarlett. You scare me." "Why?" "Because you make me feel." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if fighting something inside him. "I spent my whole life learning not to feel anything, not to let anyone get close, but you, He opened his eyes again, and there was pain there. "You destroyed all my defenses without even trying." Scarlett raised her hand and touched his face, feeling the stubble scratching lightly against her palm. "I'm scared too. Of me, of us, of what this means, of what happens when it's over." Chase held her hand against his face, turning slightly to kiss her palm. "What if it doesn't end?" "Everything ends." "Not everything." He pulled her close, arms wrapping around her waist, pressing their bodies together. "Some things are permanent. Some things change you forever." Scarlett looked into his eyes and saw the truth, saw that he was just as lost as she was, just as scared, just as desperate for something real in a world full of lies. "Chase," she whispered, I've never done this before." He frowned, confused, and then he understood. His eyes widened slightly. "You've never?" Scarlett shook her head, feeling her face burn with shame. "I always waited for the right moment, the right person, and it never—" She took a deep breath. "It never felt right. Until you." Chase was silent for a long moment, processing, and then he pulled her closer, hugging her with an intensity that made Scarlett want to cry. "Then we don't do anything," he murmured against her hair. "It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be— I want to." Scarlett pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "I want you. Today. Now. I just need you to be patient with me." Chase held her face with both hands, his eyes searching hers with a seriousness that cut deep. "Scarlett, listen. If we do this, I'll go slow. I'll take care of you. And if at any moment you want to stop, we stop. No questions, no judgment. Understand?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears she didn't expect. "How can you be like this?" "Like what?" "So real. So different from what I thought you'd be." Chase smiled. A small, sad smile, full of unspoken things. "Maybe because with you I can finally be myself." And then he kissed her again, slowly this time, deeper, more meaningful. And Scarlett surrendered completely, knowing that after that night, nothing would be the same. Because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. There was a difference between being touched and being seen. Scarlett had learned that night, in the small Brooklyn apartment, when Chase Vallemont held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The dim light from the lamp beside the bed cast soft shadows on the peeling walls. Scarlett sat on the edge of the bed, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Chase stood in front of her, gray eyes fixed on hers, waiting. Always waiting. Giving her the control she'd never had before. "Are you sure?" he asked for the third time, his voice hoarse, loaded with restraint. Scarlett nodded, extending her hand. He took it, fingers intertwining with hers, and sat beside her on the bed. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stayed there, hands intertwined, breathing heavily, the weight of what was about to happen hanging between them. "I don't want to hurt you," Chase whispered, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing each knuckle slowly. "You won't." "How do you know?" Scarlett looked into his eyes and saw everything. Fear, desire, something that looked dangerously like love. "Because you see me, and no one's ever seen me before." Something changed in his face, something broke, and then he pulled her close, lips meeting hers in a kiss that was different from all the others. Slower, deeper, full of silent promises. His hands found the buttons of her blouse and he stopped, looking into her eyes for permission. Scarlett nodded, and he began unbuttoning slowly, one button at a time, as if unwrapping a fragile gift. When the blouse fell, revealing pale skin and a simple cotton bra, Chase traced his fingers along her collarbone, down her shoulder, down her arm, memorizing every inch. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice full of reverence. "I'm not. You are." He kissed her shoulder, then the curve of her neck. "You have no idea how much." Scarlett closed her eyes, letting the sensations flood over her. His hands were warm, firm, but incredibly gentle. He wasn't in a hurry. There was no selfish urgency. Each touch was a question, and each sigh from her was the answer. She raised her hands and began unbuttoning his shirt, fingers trembling. Chase stayed still, letting her explore, letting her take the time she needed. When the shirt fell, revealing his muscular chest, the scars he carried, Scarlett traced her fingers along the lines, feeling his heart racing under her palm. "What happened here?" she asked, touching a thin scar near his ribs. "An accident when I was a kid. Fell out of a tree trying to impress someone." "Did it work?" He smiled, a small, genuine smile. "No. Broke 3 ribs and spent a month in the hospital." Scarlett kissed the scar, feeling him shudder under her lips. "Idiot." "Always have been." They lay down on the bed, bodies intertwined, skin against skin, exploring each other with a slowness that bordered on torture. Chase kissed every inch of her face, her eyelids, her cheeks, her jawline, the sensitive spot behind her ear. Scarlett arched against him, hands gripping his back, fingers digging lightly into his skin. "If you want to stop," Chase whispered against her mouth, "tell me now." "I don't want to stop." Scarlett looked into his eyes, vulnerable, exposed but confident. "I've never wanted anyone this much." Something gleamed in his eyes. Something intense, possessive, but also tender. Chase kissed her deeply, hands sliding over her body, learning her curves, her size, what made her shudder. When they finally joined together, Scarlett held her breath, her eyes filling with tears, not from pain, but from something bigger, something overwhelming. Chase stopped, forehead pressed against hers, waiting. "Are you okay?" "Yes." She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer. "Don't stop, please." He moved slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. It was intimate in a way Scarlett had never imagined it could be. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, as if 2 souls were finally recognizing each other after a lifetime of searching. Their breathing quickened, bodies finding a perfect rhythm. Scarlett dug her nails into his back, head thrown back, lost in sensations she couldn't name. Chase kissed her neck, her collarbone, whispering words she could barely hear, but felt in every cell of her body. When they reached the peak together, it was as if the entire world had stopped. For a moment there was no past, no future, no last names or class differences. There was only them, only that perfect moment, suspended in time. Afterward, lying among the rumpled sheets, Chase pulled Scarlett close, arms wrapping around her protectively. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his still racing heart, feeling his breathing gradually calm. "Are you okay?" he asked, fingers slowly caressing her hair. "More than okay." He kissed the top of her head, pulling her tighter against him. "I didn't know it could be like this." "Like what?" "Real." He was silent for a moment, fingers still caressing her hair. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people, Scarlett. Parties, events, women who wanted something from me. And I always felt alone, always, until you." Scarlett raised her head, looking at him. "I've always felt alone too." "Not anymore." He held her face tenderly. "You're the only real thing in this world, the only thing that matters." Tears filled her eyes. "How can you say that? You barely know me." "I know you." He wiped away a tear that ran down her cheek with his thumb. "Maybe not the details, maybe not your whole story, but I know you here." He placed her hand over his heart. "And you know me too. I know you do." Scarlett couldn't deny it. It was true. Somehow, impossibly, she knew Chase in a way that went beyond words. She knew his loneliness, the pain hidden behind his mask of control, the man he hid from the entire world. "What happens now?" she whispered, afraid of the answer. Chase pulled her back against his chest, arms enveloping her completely. "I don't know, but I know one thing." "What?" "That I'm not letting you go, no matter what happens, no matter who tries to separate us." He kissed the top of her head again. "You're mine now, and I'm yours." Scarlett closed her eyes, letting herself sink into that promise. She knew it was dangerous, knew their world wouldn't allow this. But in that moment, wrapped in his arms, feeling the warmth of his body against hers, she allowed herself to believe. Believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be stronger than everything else. The moon shone through the small window, casting silver light over the 2 intertwined bodies. Outside, the city continued alive, noisy, indifferent. But inside, in that small Brooklyn apartment, time had stopped. And for one night, nothing existed but them. But fate, as Scarlett would soon discover, had other plans. Plans that would destroy everything she thought she knew about Chase Valamont, about his family, and about her own mother. There were truths that changed everything. Truths that shattered worlds, destroyed souls, and transformed love into hate in a matter of seconds. Scarlett was about to discover one of those truths. Monday. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Valamont Tower, creating patterns of golden light on the marble floor. Scarlett pushed the cleaning cart down the 8th floor, one of the less used floors where old files and storage rooms that few visited were kept. She'd spent the entire weekend with Chase, locked in her apartment, lost in each other, creating memories she'd treasure forever. But now, back to reality. Scarlett felt the weight of the difference between their two worlds. She was the janitor. He was the prince. And no matter what they felt for each other, that truth remained. She stopped in front of a door at the end of the corridor. Room 847. It was ajar, which was strange, since that area was usually locked. Scarlett hesitated, then pushed the door slowly. Inside there were boxes stacked to the ceiling, old files covered in dust, documents yellowed by time, forgotten photographs. Everything seemed to have been thrown there and abandoned decades ago. Scarlett entered, curious, and began cleaning the shelves, removing the accumulated dust. That's when she saw the box. It was in the darkest corner of the room, half hidden behind other larger boxes. Unlike the others, this one had a red ribbon around it, as if someone had wanted to mark it or hide it. Scarlett pulled the box out, wiping the dust off the lid. There was no label, no identification. She knew she shouldn't open it, knew this wasn't her business. But something, an intuition, a premonition, made her unlatch the lid and look inside. Documents, dozens of them, official papers, contracts, black and white photographs. Scarlett picked up the first document, her eyes scanning the typed lines. Confidential report, Valamont Textiles Factory fire date, March 15, 2007. Location, Brooklyn outskirts, New York. Scarlett's heart began to beat faster. She continued reading. At 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 2007, a large-scale fire completely destroyed the Valamont Textiles Factory, located on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The factory, illegally operated by Valamont Holdings, employed undocumented workers and operated outside safety standards. Scarlett's hands began to tremble. She turned the page. The fire resulted in the deaths of 23 workers who were on the night shift. Emergency exits had been locked from the outside to prevent material theft, according to anonymous testimony. Firefighters couldn't arrive in time due to the factory's remote location. 23 dead, 23 people working illegally, locked in a factory with no emergency exits. And the Valamont family was responsible. Scarlett continued flipping through the documents, horror growing with each page. There were photographs, bodies covered by white sheets, the charred structure of the factory, crying families. And then there were the cover-up reports. Gregory Valamont, family patriarch, negotiated with local authorities to close the investigation. Bribes were paid, witnesses were silenced. The media received orders not to cover the incident. Officially, the fire was recorded as accidental, caused by electrical failure. No charges were filed. No compensation was paid to the families. Scarlett felt bile rise in her throat. They had killed 23 people and simply erased everything, as if those lives didn't matter, as if they were disposable. With violently trembling hands, she picked up another document. A list. Fire victims identified. Her eyes scanned the names one by one, and then she stopped. The world stopped. Emily Monroe, 34 years old, seamstress, no. No, no, no. Scarlett dropped the paper as if it were burning. She backed away, hitting the wall, breath caught in her throat. Emily Monroe, her mother, the name she'd only seen on a vague death certificate that just said, work accident. Her mother had died in that fire. Her mother had been one of the 23 people locked in an illegal Valamont factory. Her mother had been murdered by his family, by Chase's family. Scarlett fell to her knees. her chest tightening, unable to breathe. Tears began falling uncontrollably. Everything made sense now. Why her mother's death had been so quick, so quiet, without investigation. Why the orphanage had taken Scarlett without questions. Why no one ever talked about what really happened. Because the Valamonts had erased everything. They'd killed her mother, and erased her existence as if she'd never mattered. Scarlett didn't know how long she stayed there, kneeling on the cold floor of that forgotten room, holding the documents that destroyed her life. It could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Time didn't mean anything anymore. All she knew was that the man she loved, the man who had held her so tenderly, who had promised never to let her go, carried the last name of the people who had destroyed her life. The door opened behind her. Scarlett didn't need to look to know who it was. "Scarlett," Chase's voice was full of concern. "I saw you coming in here. What are you—" He stopped, seeing the documents scattered on the floor around her. "What is this?" She turned slowly, tears still streaming down her face, eyes red with pain. Chase took a step into the room, his eyes going from the papers to her face. "Scarlett, what happened? Why are you crying?" She picked up the victim list and extended it to him with a trembling hand. "Read it." Chase took the paper, confused, eyes scanning the names. She saw the exact moment he found the name, saw the color drain from his face, saw understanding hit him like a punch to the stomach. "Emily Monroe," Scarlett said, her voice broken, filled with a pain she didn't know she could feel. "My mother, she died in that fire, in that factory, your family's factory." Chase shook his head, eyes wide. No, I didn't know. Scarlett, I swear I didn't. Your family killed my mother," Scarlett screamed, her voice echoing through the empty room. "They locked her in an illegal factory with no emergency exits and left her to burn to death, and then they erased everything. Paid to silence everyone, as if she were nothing, as if those 23 people were disposable." "I didn't know," Chase repeated, his voice breaking. He took a step toward her, but Scarlett backed away. "Don't come near me. Scarlett, please. You're the son of murderers." The words came out like poison, cutting deep. "Your family built this empire on the blood of people like my mother, and you benefited from all of it, lived in this tower, in this luxury, while I grew up alone, without a mother, with nothing." Chase was pale, hands trembling. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Scarlett, I never knew about that fire. My father, he never told me. He hid it from everyone." "And does that change anything?" Scarlett asked, tears still falling. "Does it change the fact that your last name killed my mother? That every time I look at you, I'll remember that she died so your family could get richer?" The silence that followed was devastating. Chase looked destroyed, as if something inside him had broken irreparably. He dropped the paper, running his hands through his hair, trying to process, trying to find words that didn't exist. "What do you want me to do?" he finally whispered, his voice hoarse with desperation. Scarlett looked at him, at the man who had held her so gently just 2 days ago, who had promised never to let her go, and she felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. "I want you to disappear from my life." "Scarlett, get out!" she screamed with a force she didn't know she had. "I can't look at you. I can't do this." Chase took a step toward her, hand extended, desperate. "Please, let me fix this. Let me find out the truth. I'll make my father pay. I'll expose everything. It doesn't matter what you do," Scarlett interrupted, her voice cold now, dead. "You're still a Valamont, and I'm still the daughter of the woman your family killed." She picked up the documents from the floor, putting them back in the box, and walked past him without looking into his eyes. When she reached the door, she stopped but didn't turn around. "Don't look for me again," she said, her voice empty. "We're done." And then she left, leaving Chase alone in that dark room, surrounded by the ghosts of crimes he never knew existed, but that he would now carry forever. Pain has weight. Scarlett had always known that, but she'd never felt anything as heavy as those documents now hidden under her bed. 3 days had passed since she discovered the truth, 3 days without sleep, 3 days avoiding any place where she might run into Chase Valamont. But Manhattan was too small, and fate too cruel. Thursday night, Scarlett was leaving the grocery store with 2 shopping bags when she saw him, standing across the street, leaning against a black car, eyes fixed on her. He looked destroyed, deep, dark circles, stubble, wrinkled clothes. Nothing like the impeccable man she'd known. Scarlett froze. All her defenses went up at once. She turned, ready to leave, but his voice reached her. "Scarlett, please." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." She closed her eyes, gripping the bag handles until her fingers hurt. Part of her wanted to run. Another part, the stupid part, the part that still loved him despite everything, wanted to listen. Against her better judgment, she turned around. Chase crossed the street, keeping his distance as if afraid she'd flee. When he stopped a few feet away, Scarlett could see the raw pain in his eyes. Pain that mirrored hers. "What do you want?" Her voice came out colder than she intended. "I've spent the last 3 days investigating," Chase said quickly, as if afraid she'd leave before he finished. "I got into my father's files, confronted the family lawyers, paid private investigators, and I found things that make me want to destroy my own last name." Scarlett said nothing, just waited. "It wasn't just a fire, Scarlett." His voice trembled. "It was criminal negligence. My father knew that factory didn't have an operating license, knew the conditions were deadly. But he kept it running because the profit was high and illegal workers couldn't complain." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated, destroyed. 23 people died because he chose money over human lives. And then he paid to erase everything. Paid off politicians, judges, journalists, turned a massacre into an accident. Tears burned Scarlett's eyes, but she held them back. She wouldn't cry in front of him. Not again. "And what do you expect me to do with this information?" she asked, her voice tight. "Forgive you? Say it's okay?" "No." Chase shook his head. "I don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect anything. But I need you to know that I didn't know. I was 7 years old when that happened. My father kept me away from the family's dirty business. He raised me in ignorance, made me believe we were good, that our wealth was legitimate." He laughed bitterly. What a lie. Scarlett saw the anger in his eyes. Genuine anger, not directed at her but at his own blood. "You really think that changes anything?" she asked, her voice breaking despite her effort to keep it steady. "You're still a Valamont, still benefited from the money that came from that factory, from my mother's blood." "I know." Chase took a step closer, eyes pleading. "And if I could go back in time and change everything, I would. But I can't. All I can do is try to fix what's still possible." "How?" "By exposing everything." The intensity in his voice made Scarlett shudder. "Every crime, every bribe, every life my father destroyed. I'm going to hand everything over to the authorities. I'll testify against him. I'll destroy the Valamont Empire if necessary." Scarlett shook her head, incredulous. "You're willing to destroy your own family?" "They're not my family." His voice was hard as steel. "They're monsters who share my blood, and I won't protect them. Not after what they did to you, to your mother, to all those people." Silence, heavy, loaded. Scarlett wanted to believe him, wanted so badly to believe, but the pain was still too fresh, too deep. "And what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Chase looked at her with an intensity that cut deep. "I want you to know that I love you, that nothing that happened changes that, and that if you give me a chance, just one, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what my family did." "You can't make up for a life taken, Chase." "I know." Tears glistened in his eyes. "But I can try to bring justice. I can make sure your mother and all the other victims aren't forgotten. I can make Gregory Valamont pay for what he did." Scarlett felt something break inside her. He was being sincere, she could see it. But it still hurt so much. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she confessed, tears finally escaping. "I look at you and see the last name that took everything from me. Then don't forgive me." Chase took another step, now so close she could feel his warmth. "Hate me, blame me. Do whatever you need to do, but don't push me away. Not when I finally found something real in this life of lies." Scarlett looked into his eyes and saw everything. Love, desperation, guilt, determination. He wasn't pretending. He was really willing to turn against his own family for her. "If I do this," she said slowly. "If I give you a chance, you have to promise me one thing. Anything. Promise you'll see it through, that you'll expose every crime, that you'll make your father pay no matter the cost." Chase held her face with both hands, eyes fixed on hers. "I promise. Even if it means losing everything. Even if it means going to prison with him, I'll bring justice for your mother." Scarlett closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. And then, against all logic, against all common sense, she leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. "I don't know if this will work," she whispered. "Me neither." He pulled her closer. "But I have to try, because losing you would be worse than losing everything else." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, tears mixing, broken hearts trying to find their way back to each other. "My father will try to destroy us," Chase warned, his voice low. "When he finds out I've turned against him, he'll come after you, after me, after everything we love. Then we prepare ourselves." Scarlett pulled back, wiping her tears, a new determination hardening her voice. "We fight." Chase took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Together?" Scarlett looked at his hand holding hers. Two people from different worlds, united by pain, by truth, and by something stronger than any division. "Together," she confirmed. And there, on that busy Manhattan street, while the city continued indifferent around them, an alliance was formed. Not of perfect love or guaranteed happiness, but of justice, of truth, and the promise that no matter what came, they would face it together, even if it cost them everything. There were decisions that changed the course of a life, and there were decisions that changed who you were at the deepest level of the soul. Chase Vallemont was about to make the second kind. Saturday morning. The Vallemont mansion in the Hamptons rose like a monument to greed. 12,000 square meters of obscene luxury, impeccable gardens, an ocean view worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Chase had grown up there, but today, looking at that imposing structure, all he saw was a tomb, a place where morality had gone to die. He parked the car in the circular driveway and took a deep breath. Scarlett sat beside him, pale, tense, but determined. They'd spent the last 2 days gathering evidence, copies of the fire documents, recordings of compromising conversations Chase had obtained from his father's office, testimonies from former employees who were finally willing to speak. Everything ready to destroy Gregory Vallemont. "Are you sure about this?" Scarlett asked, her voice low. "Once you go in there, there's no going back." Chase looked at her, at the woman who had turned his world upside down, who had shown him what really mattered. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He got out of the car, walked around and opened the door for her. Together, they climbed the marble steps leading to the main entrance. The door opened before he could knock, revealing Marcus, the butler who'd worked for the family for 30 years. "Mr. Vallemont," Marcus greeted, his eyes briefly sliding to Scarlett with barely disguised disapproval. "Your father is waiting in the library." "I'm sure he is," Chase murmured, guiding Scarlett through the entrance hall. The mansion was exactly as he remembered, cold, impersonal, filled with expensive artwork that no one really appreciated. Each room was a statement of power, each detail calculated to impress and intimidate. Scarlett squeezed his hand as they walked, and Chase felt her strength flow through that simple touch. She was afraid, he could feel it, but she was there, fighting beside him. The library was at the end of a long corridor, double mahogany doors, high ceiling with frescoes, walls lined with books no one had ever read. Gregory Vallemont sat behind an enormous desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, despite it being only 10 in the morning. He was 62, silver hair impeccably combed, blue eyes cold as ice. He wore a cashmere sweater and tailored pants, casual but still exuding power. When Chase and Scarlett entered, Gregory didn't stand, just looked, eyes going from Chase to Scarlett, then back to Chase. A thin, cruel smile curved his lips. "So it's true," Gregory said, his voice drawling, amused. "My son is fucking the janitor." Scarlett stiffened beside Chase. He felt anger burn in his veins but kept his voice controlled. "Watch what you say." Gregory laughed, a humorless sound. "Or what? You'll punch me?" "Please, Chase. You never had the stomach for confrontation. Maybe not before. Chase took a step forward, shielding Scarlett with his body. But things have changed. Clearly. Gregory took a sip of whiskey, eyes never leaving Chase. So what's this? You came to ask my permission to date the help. Because the answer is no. Obviously. I didn't come to ask for anything. Chase reached into his jacket's inner pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He threw it onto the desk. I came to give you this. Gregory looked at the envelope as if it were a bomb. What is this? Open it. With deliberately slow movements, Gregory picked up the envelope and opened it. He pulled out the documents from inside, eyes scanning the pages. Chase saw the exact moment he understood, saw the color drain from his face, his jaw tighten. Where did you get this? Gregory's voice was dangerously low. Doesn't matter where, what matters is I have copies, many copies, in safe places, and tomorrow morning all of this goes to the federal police, to the district attorney, to the media. Gregory stood slowly, hands flat on the desk. You won't do this. Yes, I will. You know what this means. Gregory walked around the desk, each step calculated, threatening. This doesn't just destroy me, it destroys you too. Destroys our name, our fortune, everything. I know. Chase stood firm, and I don't care. Gregory stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowing, and then he looked at Scarlett, really seeing her for the first time. Something changed in his expression. Monroe, he said slowly. Scarlett Monroe. He laughed, a cruel sound, full of understanding. Ah, now it all makes sense. You're her daughter, aren't you? The seamstresses. Scarlett lifted her chin, eyes meeting Gregory's without fear. Emily Monroe. My mother. One of the 23 people you killed. Killed? Gregory laughed again. It was an accident, a regrettable tragedy. It was murder, Scarlett interrupted, her voice firm as steel. You locked those people in an illegal factory with no emergency exits, and when they died, you paid to erase everything. Gregory looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to Chase. So that's it? You're going to destroy your own family because of some slut who wants revenge? Chase moved so fast even he was surprised. He grabbed his father by the collar of his cashmere sweater, slamming him against the wall. Say that about her again, he growled, face inches from Gregory's, and I'll kill you right here. Gregory smiled, a cold, calculated smile. There you are, finally growing some balls. Chase released him forcefully, stepping back. Gregory straightened his sweater, still smiling. You won't do any of this, Gregory said with irritating confidence, because if you do, it's not just my name that falls, it's yours too. What do you think you'll have? A happy life with this nobody? You'll be poor, Chase, you'll be hated. No one will want to hire you. No one will want to associate with you. I know. Chase took Scarlett's hand, intertwining their fingers. And I'd rather be poor and have a soul than be rich and a monster like you. Gregory's mask finally fell. Raw anger took over his face. You're an idiot. A naive kid who thinks love conquers all. But let me tell you the truth, son. He spat the last word like poison. She doesn't love you, she hates you. You're the son of the man who killed her mother, and every time she looks at you, that's what she'll see. Maybe, Chase admitted, his voice calm. But at least when I look in the mirror, I'll see a man, not a coward who kills people for money. Gregory took a threatening step toward them. If you do this, you're dead to me. Understand? Dead. Good. Chase began leading Scarlett toward the door. Because you've been dead to me for a long time. Chase! Gregory's voice echoed through the library. You walk out that door and I'm coming after you, after her. I'll destroy everything you both love. Chase stopped at the door, looking back one last time. You can try. But the difference between you and me, Father, is that I have something worth fighting for. You only have money, and money doesn't buy a soul. They left, Gregory's words still echoing behind them. Threats, promises of destruction. But Chase didn't look back, kept walking hand in hand with Scarlett until they reached the car. When they got in, Scarlett finally breathed. You really did it. I did. Chase looked at her, and there was peace in his eyes despite everything. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I feel free. Scarlett held his face, eyes searching his. He's going to come after us. I know. It could get dangerous. I know. Chase covered her hand with his. But if I fall with you. And that, I can live with that. Scarlett smiled, small, sad, but genuine. Then let's fall together. Chase pulled her into a kiss, deep, desperate, full of impossible promises. And when they separated, he pressed his forehead against hers. Where do we go now? Away from here. Chase started the car. I have an old family property in the Hamptons, a place my father forgot exists. We hide there while I prepare everything to hand over to the authorities. And after? Chase looked at her, at the woman who had turned his world upside down, who had shown him what really mattered in life. After we rebuild, from scratch if necessary. Scarlett nodded, determination hardening her face. Together, he confirmed. And as they drove along the coastal road, leaving the Valemont mansion behind, Chase knew he'd made the right choice, even if it cost everything, because some things were worth more than money, and Scarlett Monroe was one of them. There was a calm before the storm, a heavy silence that preceded destruction. Chase and Scarlett felt it the moment they arrived at the old Valemont property in the Hamptons. The house was hidden at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by ancient trees and a stone wall covered in ivy. It was smaller than the main mansion, only 8 bedrooms, but still impressive with its colonial architecture and ocean view. It had belonged to Chase's grandmother, abandoned after her death 10 years ago. No one in the family came here. No one cared. It was the perfect hiding place. How much time do you think we have? Scarlett asked as they entered, her voice echoing through the empty, dust-covered hallways. A day, maybe 2. Chase locked the door behind them, checking the windows. My father has resources. He'll find out where we are eventually. And when he does? Chase looked at her, jaw tense. Then we fight. They spent Sunday organizing the evidence, creating digital backups, contacting trusted lawyers and journalists. Chase had a plan. Monday morning, everything would be delivered simultaneously to the FBI, the district attorney, and the press. There would be no way for Gregory to escape this time. But Gregory Valemont wasn't a man to wait around. Monday, 2 in the morning. Scarlett woke to a sound, low, almost imperceptible. The creak of a door. Footsteps downstairs. She froze, heart racing, and turned to wake Chase. He was already awake, sitting up in bed, alert, listening. He's here, Chase whispered, already getting up, quickly pulling on his pants. How many? Scarlett asked, trembling, looking for clothes. I don't know. But it's not just him. My father never gets his own hands dirty. More sounds. Footsteps in the hallway. Low voices. Chase grabbed his phone, dialing 911, but there was no signal. They'd cut the line. Of course. Plan B, Chase said, taking her hand. We go out the back window, get to the car, and... The bedroom door exploded with a kick. 2 large men in black suits entered, followed by a third. And then finally Gregory Valemont appeared in the doorway, hands in his pockets, calm as if making a social visit. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Gregory smiled, that cold, predatory smile. I own half this coast, I have eyes everywhere. Chase pushed Scarlett behind him, shielding her with his body. Get out of here. This is my property, son. Technically, you're the one trespassing. Gregory took a step into the room, the guards beside him. But I'm willing to forgive that if you make the right choice. There's no choice to make. The evidence has already been sent. Gregory laughed. No, it hasn't. I hacked your emails, blocked your contacts, nothing left this house. He pulled something from his pocket, a flash drive. And this? This is everything you had. Your backups, your copies, everything. Chase's blood ran cold. How did you... You think you're the first to try to bring me down? Gregory shook his head, amused. I built an empire on the bones of people smarter than you. You're just a boy playing hero. Scarlett felt panic rise. Without the evidence, they had nothing. Gregory had won. But here's what's going to happen, Gregory continued, pocketing the flash drive. You're going to come home. You're going to forget this janitor, and you're going to learn your place in the family, or... He looked at Scarlett with a coldness that made her blood freeze. Or she disappears, simple as that. You won't touch her, Chase growled, fists clenched. Won't I? Look around you, son. I have 3 armed men. What do you have? Moral indignation? Gregory took a step closer. I can make you watch while they take her. I can make her disappear the same way those 23 people disappeared from the records, as if she never existed. Scarlett felt real terror for the first time. This man wasn't bluffing, he would actually do it. Or, Gregory said, his voice softening dangerously, you come with me, now, and she lives. Poor, but alive. What's it going to be, Chase? Chase turned to Scarlett, eyes filled with despair. She saw the decision being made, saw him preparing to sacrifice himself for her. No, Scarlett whispered, grabbing his arm. Don't do this. I have to. No, she screamed, tears streaming. I won't let you hand yourself over to that monster. Gregory gave a signal. One of the guards pulled a gun, pointing it at Scarlett. Last chance, Gregory said calmly. Chase looked at the gun, at Scarlett, at his father, and Scarlett saw something change in his eyes. Not surrender, anger, pure, uncontrollable anger. You want to control me, Chase said quietly, dangerously. Want to force me to choose? Exactly. Then here's my choice. In an explosive movement, Chase lunged forward, not toward Gregory, but at the guard with the gun. He caught him by surprise, punching him in the face, fighting for control of the weapon. The room erupted into chaos. The other guards advanced. Scarlett screamed, and then the shot rang out, loud, deafening, final. Chase fell. Not completely. He staggered back, hand going to his shoulder, blood streaming between his fingers. But he didn't fall. He stayed on his feet, the gun now in his hand pointed directly at Gregory. The silence that followed was absolute. Back up, Chase said, his voice hoarse with pain, but steady. All of you. Now. The guards looked at Gregory, waiting for orders. Gregory looked at his son, at the blood streaming, at the gun trembling in his hand, at the deadly determination in his eyes. You don't have the guts, Gregory said, but there was uncertainty in his voice for the first time. Try me. Chase cocked the gun. You destroyed everything I believed in, killed innocent people, and now you tried to take the only thing that matters to me. He took a step forward, ignoring the pain. So try me, because right now, I have absolutely nothing to lose. Gregory saw something in his son's face, something he'd never seen before. Resolution, strength, the willingness to do whatever was necessary. And for the first time in his life, Gregory Vallemont felt fear. Let's go, he told the guards, backing away slowly. But this isn't over, Chase, you hear me? This doesn't end here. You're right, Chase agreed, the gun still pointed. Because I'm going to destroy you, no matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to do. You're going to pay for what you did. Gregory stopped at the door, looking back one last time. You chose her over family, over everything. I hope it's worth it. It is, Chase said without hesitation. She's worth 1,000 of you. Gregory left, the guards following, footsteps descending the stairs, the front door slamming, the sound of cars driving away. And then silence. Chase let the gun fall, his legs finally giving out. Scarlett ran to him, catching him before he fell completely. Chase, oh God, you're bleeding, you... I'm fine, he gasped, though clearly he wasn't. Went straight through, I think. Tears streamed down her face as she pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Why did you do that? Why did you... Because I love you. He looked into her eyes, even as pain distorted his face. And if I let him take you, I'd never forgive myself. Scarlett held his face with one bloodied hand. You're crazy. Completely crazy. Probably. He smiled, a weak smile, but genuine. But you're worth the craziness. We need to get you to a hospital. No. Chase grabbed her wrist. They'll track that. We need to go now. Run before he comes back. Run where? Chase looked into her eyes. Anywhere we can start over. Scarlett nodded, helping him to his feet. Together, him bleeding, her trembling, they left that house, got into the car, and disappeared into the night. Behind them, the Vallemont property stood empty, silent, a mute witness to another battle in a war that was far from over. But this time, Gregory Vallemont hadn't won, and he knew it. There were truths that couldn't be buried forever, no matter how much money, power, or influence someone had. Truth had a way of finding the light. And for Gregory Vallemont, that light was about to burn down everything he'd built. Chase and Scarlett drove all night, stopping only so she could improvise a bandage on his shoulder using the car's first aid kit. The bullet had pierced the muscle, but exited the other side. Painful, but not fatal. They ended up at a cheap motel in Pennsylvania, paying cash, giving no real names. There, in a room that smelled of mold and disinfectant, Chase finally broke down. Not physically, though the pain in his shoulder was excruciating, but emotionally. Everything he'd held in for days, weeks, finally came out. "I failed," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. He got the evidence. Everything we had. Scarlett knelt in front of him, placing her hands over his. "Not everything. Scarlett, you saw, he had the flash drive, blocked our emails. We don't have the physical copies." She interrupted him, eyes gleaming. "When you were in the shower yesterday, I made paper copies. Every document, every photo. They're in the trunk, hidden inside the suitcase." Chase raised his head, eyes widening. "You, what? I didn't fully trust digital, not after everything I learned about your father." She squeezed his hands. "We still have a chance, Chase. We can still do this." Something ignited in his eyes. Hope, determination. He pulled her close, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, and kissed her with desperate intensity. "How are you so perfect?" he murmured against her lips. "I'm not perfect, just cautious." She smiled, small, tired, but genuine. "Now rest. Tomorrow we finish this. Tuesday morning." Using a burner phone bought at a convenience store, Chase contacted Rebecca Chen, an investigative journalist from the New York Times known for exposing corporate corruption. She'd tried to investigate the Vallemont family years ago, but never got enough evidence. Now she had it. They met at a public cafe in Philadelphia, neutral territory, away from New York and Gregory's influence. Rebecca was an Asian woman in her early 40s, black hair pulled into a tight bun, sharp eyes that missed nothing. When Chase placed the first stack of documents in front of her, Rebecca's eyes widened. "My God," she whispered, flipping through the pages. This is direct evidence, photos, testimonies, bribery records." She looked at Chase. "How did you get this?" "My father archived everything. Kept it as insurance, I guess. In case he needed to blackmail someone." Chase ran his hand through his hair. He never imagined his own son would turn against him. Rebecca continued reading, stopping at a particularly horrific photo, bodies covered by white sheets outside the burned factory. 23 dead, and he just erased everything. He paid off politicians, judges, cops. Scarlett spoke for the first time. "My mother was one of them, Emily Monroe, locked in there with no way out." Rebecca looked at Scarlett with a mixture of pity and fury. "I'm going to destroy him. I'll put this on the front page and make sure the whole world knows what Gregory Vallemont really is." "When can you publish?" Chase asked. "Tomorrow morning. Front page, lead story." Rebecca began photographing the documents with her phone. "But you need to prepare yourselves. When this comes out, it's going to be war. Gregory will come with everything." "Let him come," Chase said, jaw firm. "This time, the truth is on our side." Wednesday, 6 a.m. The story exploded. Vallemont empire built on murder and corruption. Leaked documents reveal decades of crimes. The headline was everywhere. New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, news sites around the world. The photos from the fire, the victims' names, the bribery records. Everything exposed under the harsh light of truth. By 8 a.m., the FBI raided the Vallemont mansion in the Hamptons and the tower in Manhattan. Gregory was arrested live, in front of cameras from around the world, handcuffed and escorted to a police car. His face, normally so controlled, so powerful, was pale, defeated. By 10 a.m., Vallemont holding stock plummeted 87%. Investors fled, partners cancelled contracts. The empire that had taken decades to build crumbled in a matter of hours. By 2 p.m., more arrests were made. Executives, lawyers, politicians who had been bought. The corruption was deep, systemic, and now it was being ripped out by the roots. Chase and Scarlett watched it all from a small rented apartment in Boston, far from the chaos of New York. She sat beside him on the couch, her head resting on his good shoulder, fingers intertwined. "It's over," Scarlett whispered, watching Gregory being taken to prison on the TV screen. "It's over," Chase confirmed, but his voice was empty. There was no triumph, just relief and sadness. Scarlett turned to look at him. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." Chase looked at his own hands. "He was a monster. I know that, but he was also my father, and I just destroyed everything he built." "He destroyed himself," Scarlett corrected gently. "You just brought the truth to light." "I know, but it still hurts." She held his face, forcing him to look at her. "You did the right thing. 23 families will finally have justice. My mother will finally have justice." Tears filled his eyes. "But I lost everything. My name, my fortune, my family. Not everything." Scarlett touched her forehead to his. "You have me." Chase pulled her close, embracing her as if she were the only solid thing in a crumbling world. And maybe she was. "If you fall, I fall with you," Scarlett whispered, repeating the words she'd said days ago. "With you by my side," Chase responded, voice breaking. "I never fall." In the following weeks, Gregory Valamont's trial became the most watched event of the year. Witnesses who had been silenced for decades finally spoke. Victims' families, including Scarlett, gave emotional testimonies, and Chase, against his lawyer's advice, testified against his own father. It was devastating, painful, but necessary. In the end, Gregory Valamont was sentenced to 45 years in prison without possibility of parole. Valamont Holdings was dissolved, assets were sold, and every penny went to a compensation fund for the victims' families and workers exploited by the company over the years. Chase was left with nothing. Literally nothing. No money, no name, nothing but the clothes he wore and the woman by his side. And strangely, he'd never felt richer. 3 months after the trial, Chase was at a public hospital doing physical therapy for his shoulder. The doctor said he'd recover 90% of his mobility. Good enough. When he came out of the session, Scarlett was waiting in the hallway, holding 2 coffees. "How'd it go?" she asked, handing him one. "Painful, but I'm improving." He took a sip, making a face. "This coffee is terrible." "It's what we can afford," she smiled. "Get used to it." They left the hospital together, walking through the streets of Boston. They didn't have a car now, didn't have luxuries. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that cost half her salary. She'd gotten a job as an administrative assistant at a local school. Chase was working at a cafe, waiting tables, cleaning bathrooms. The Valamont heir now cleaned toilets to survive. And yet, walking hand in hand with Scarlett under the autumn sun, Chase smiled. "What are you thinking about?" Scarlett asked. "That I should have done this years ago." "What? Destroy your family and become poor?" "No." He stopped, turning to her. "Choose what really matters. Choose truth. Choose you." Scarlett smiled, that smile that made everything worthwhile. "No regrets?" "None." Chase pulled her close. "I destroyed my name for you. And you know what? Now I want to build something new with yours." Scarlett blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Chase knelt right there, in the middle of the sidewalk, people passing around them. He didn't have a ring, didn't have money for one, but he had love. And sometimes that was all that mattered. "Scarlett Monroe," he said, looking at her with eyes full of everything that mattered. "Will you marry me? I can't give you luxury, can't give you an easy life, but I can give you truth, loyalty, and love for the rest of my life." Tears streamed down her face. "You're crazy. Is that a yes?" She knelt in front of him, holding his face with both hands. "It's a yes. It always was, yes." And there, on that ordinary sidewalk, on an ordinary day, 2 people who had lost everything found what really mattered. Each other. There were endings that closed stories, and there were endings that were just new beginnings in disguise. For Chase and Scarlett, what seemed like the end was actually the first chapter of something completely new. 6 months after the trial, on a cold April morning, Chase stood in front of a modest building in the Bronx. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't impressive, but it was theirs. Well, technically it belonged to a social investment fund that believed in his vision. but it was theirs to transform into something that mattered. The sign out front still smelled of fresh paint. Emily Monroe Support Center. For families victimized by corporate injustice. Scarlett came out of the building carrying a box of office supplies and stopped beside him, looking at the sign. "Your mother would be proud," Chase said softly. Tears filled her eyes, but they were different tears now. Not of pain, but of something deeper. Healing. Purpose. She would have loved this. The center had taken months to organize. Chase had used his knowledge of the corporate world, the same tactics his father had used for evil, for good. He'd raised funds, organized pro bono lawyers, created support programs. Everything built on the rubble of the Valemont empire. "How many families have registered already?" Scarlett asked. 47 just this week. Chase wrapped his arm around her waist. People who were exploited, silenced, forgotten. Now they have a place that fights for them. Scarlett rested her head on his shoulder. "You know your father will hear about this." "Good." Chase looked at the sign again. "I want him to know. I want him to know that every life he destroyed now has a voice. And that voice will last far longer than his name." That night there was a small opening ceremony. No press, they'd learned to avoid spotlights. But the families who would be helped by the center were there. 23 candles were lit, one for each victim of the 2007 fire. And in the center of them all, a photo of Emily Monroe, young, smiling, full of the life that was stolen from her. Scarlett stood in front of the small gathered group, hands trembling as she held a paper with the speech she'd prepared. But when she looked at those faces, faces that carried pain similar to hers, the written words didn't seem enough. So she folded the paper and spoke from the heart. "My mother died when I was 7 years old," she began, voice breaking but steady. "For a long time I didn't know how, didn't know why. I just knew she was gone and had left a hole that was never filled." She took a deep breath. "But now I know the truth. And the truth is she didn't leave me. She was taken from me. By greed. By negligence. By people who thought lives like hers didn't matter." Tears flowed freely now. But she didn't wipe them away. "For years I carried anger, carried pain, and when I discovered who was responsible..." She looked at Chase, who stood at the back of the room, eyes red. "I almost let that anger destroy me, almost let hate win. But then I realized something. My mother wouldn't want me to live in hatred. She would want me to transform that pain into something that mattered, something that would prevent other families from feeling what I felt." Scarlett looked around the room. "That's why this center exists. Not for revenge, but for justice. To ensure that voices like ours, voices that have always been silenced, are finally heard." Applause filled the small room. It wasn't loud, it wasn't grand, but it was genuine, full of hope. When the ceremony ended and people left, Chase and Scarlett stayed alone in the center, arranging chairs, turning off lights. It was simple work, mundane, but there was something deeply satisfying about it. "You were incredible today," Chase said, picking up the last chair. "I was terrified." "Didn't seem like it." He crossed the room to her. "You were strong, eloquent, exactly what those people needed to hear." Scarlett looked around the center, at the simple tables, the folding chairs, the informational posters on the walls. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. It was real. "We did it, didn't we?" she said softly. "After everything, we did it." Chase pulled her close, arms wrapping around her. "Yes, we did." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the peaceful silence of this place that represented everything they'd fought to build. "Do you regret it?" Scarlett asked suddenly. "Everything you lost?" Chase pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "I didn't lose anything that mattered. I lost money, yes. Lost a tainted last name. Lost a family that was never really family." He held her face tenderly. "But I gained you, gained purpose, gained the chance to look in the mirror and see a real man, not a reflection of what my father wanted me to be." "Chase, I destroyed my name for you," he continued, echoing the words he'd said months ago. "And now I want to build something new with yours. Not just the center, but a life, a family, a future." Scarlett smiled through her tears. "Mrs. Scarlett Valemont sounds terrible." "Good." Chase smiled. That genuine smile she loved so much. Because I was thinking Chase Monroe has a certain charm. She laughed. A real laugh, light, full of joy she hadn't felt in so long. You'd drop your last name completely? Already did. The Valemont name died with my father in prison. I'm someone else now. He touched his forehead to hers. I'm the man you helped me become. They kissed there in the middle of that simple center, under the soft light of the candles still burning in honor of the dead. It was a different kiss from the others. It wasn't urgent or desperate. It was peaceful. It promised a future, not just survival. When they separated, Scarlett looked at her mother's photo on the wall. I think she would have liked you. You think? Not as a Valemont. Never as a Valemont. She looked at him. But as the man who fought for truth. As the man who chose what was right instead of what was easy. Yes, she would have loved that man. 3 years later, the Emily Monroe Center had expanded to 5 locations in 3 states. It had helped over 2,000 families obtain justice against corrupt corporations. Chase had become a lawyer, specializing in labor law. He'd gone back to school at 33, studying at night while working at the center during the day. Scarlett managed operations, organized fundraising campaigns, and spoke at events about social justice. They got married in a small ceremony in Brooklyn, near where the factory used to stand. In place of the factory now stood a park, Emily Monroe Memorial Park, funded by the Compensation Fund. 23 trees were planted there, 1 for each victim. And on a summer afternoon, Chase and Scarlett sat on a bench in that park, watching children play, families having picnics. Life flourishing where before there had been only death and forgetfulness. Scarlett held something small in her hands, an ultrasound photo. She looked at Chase, heart racing, nervous but excited. So, she said casually, what do you think about expanding our project? Chase looked at her, confused. Another center? I don't know if we have the budget yet, but I can check. Not that kind of expansion. She handed him the photo. Chase looked. Blinked, looked again, and then his eyes widened as he understood. We're... Scarlett nodded, tears of joy streaming. Yes. Chase pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe, laughing and crying at the same time. When? How? I mean, I know how, but 12 weeks, I found out yesterday. He pulled back, holding her face, eyes gleaming. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Chase looked around the park, at the trees representing lost lives, at the children representing ongoing hope, at the woman in his arms who represented everything that mattered. Let the tainted names die with us, he said softly, echoing the words he'd said at the center's opening. Let the future belong to the victims, not the guilty. Scarlett touched her still flat belly, and to children who will never know that darkness. Never, Chase promised. Our child will grow up knowing only truth, love, justice. They sat there as the sun set over the park, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And for the first time since it all began, since that first meeting on the 100th floor of Valemont Tower, Scarlett felt complete peace. The empire had fallen. Truth had won, and from the ashes of everything destroyed, something new and beautiful had grown. A love not built on lies or secrets, but on difficult choices, real sacrifices, and the courage to do what was right, even when it cost everything. And now, sitting in that park where her mother once worked and died, Scarlett and Chase looked toward the future. A future full of promise, of purpose, of new life. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge, it was about transforming pain into power, loss into legacy, and forbidden love into eternal love. Some loves are born in light and some loves are born in darkness, but choose to shine. Scarlett and Chase lost everything, fortune, last names, certainties, but they gained something money could never buy, the freedom to be who they truly were. He stopped being the heir to an empire of lies. She stopped being just the daughter of a forgotten victim. Together, they transformed pain into justice, anger into purpose, and a forbidden encounter into a love that changed not only their lives, but the lives of thousands. Because sometimes, destroying everything is the only way to build something true. And maybe, deep down, this story is also about us, about all the times we need to choose between what's comfortable and what's right, between silence and truth. What choice would you make? If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth hearing, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing stories like this.